All right, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. So I've got a deck that I haven't touched in probably 5 years, and it's Edric, as you can see. And in fact, you may be seeing a video on Ryan Weissman's channel as well about this deck potentially, mainly because I worked on it. He happened to visit me, and I got the opportunity to spend some time with him, and we worked on this initial build. Between the video that he's going to put out and the video that you see now, a couple of cards have been changed. Not too many, but there have been maybe 2 changes. And so anyway, I'll try to cover that. 2 or 3 changes, I think. But in the meantime, we'll talk about this deck a little bit, and then I've got some really interesting games, a lot of fun. Deck's super cool. So the first thing is, like, why would I switch from Brea to Edric? And the main reason, well, one of the reasons is just that I always play control, but I like to have a different feel to the games that I'm playing. And, Brea was getting a little bit stale. It's very exciting. I will very quickly right now just touch on, and this will come up the next time I play Brea, one tech card that I've added to Brea that's new, which is a Scheming Fence. And of course, from the newest set, I'm also running Rafine's Tower, which is the change that I was very eager to implement, the Plains Island Swamp, which has replaced the Plains Island Mountain. It's just far, far, far better in this deck. And Scheming Fence, so a 2/3 that comes into play, turns off anything in the activated abilities of a permanent, and gains those activated abilities of a non-land permanent. You can't shut off their lands. But what you can shut off on turn 2 is their Soul Ring, and then you have effectively control magic their Soul Ring for as long as this thing's in play. So, you go land, they go land Soul Ring, you go land Scheming Fence, their Soul Ring doesn't tap for mana, and on the next turn, Scheming Fence does, which is amazing. So, real easy fit into Brea. Because this is a creature that wants to stay in play and I needed to make a cut somewhere, I cut the Abyss. I don't like the anti-synergy cards. I already had Dark Confidant who wants to stay in play, and it was just one card too many. So I think the deck is totally fine without the Abyss in general. It's a great card, but it's not a necessary card. And Scheming Fence being just super broken, I think is worth it, or super awesome, because again, turn 2 dealing with Soul Ring, super important. But also late game, like, you can shut off Planeswalkers. Scheming Fence won't gain the ability of the Planeswalker, but it'll still shut it off. So it's still a muddle the mixture target that you can use to effectively disenchant anything that's giving you a problem if it has activated abilities. So any Planeswalker, and that's a big deal. So anyway, that's new for Brea. Those 2 changes there. Still never found room for the blue, white, black instant that can't be countered. That is kind of like Vindicate. It's destroy target non-land permanent though. If it said permanent, I would just swap it for Vindicate. But it says non-land permanent, so I don't know where the swap is. It's very important that Vindicate's able to kill things like Gaia's Cradle. Speaking of Cradle, let's go back to Edric. All right. So, lots of changes, of course, in the last few years. So, and if you think of anything that the deck needs, that you think the deck needs, please make the suggestion in the comments. But in the meantime, I'll kind of talk about how this deck plays out, and then you'll see it in practice once we get started with the games. But basically, this is a tempo deck, it's a control deck, but it's a control deck that wins through optimal tempo. Basically, you want to make sure that you're spending the most mana every turn, and your opponent is not. Classically, like, this is sort of how the deck style control always works. But in this deck, it's even more profound because of the fact that Edric often acts as like a flood of free card drawing. So you don't have to spend mana on card drawing, and so you can spend more mana on actually losing card advantage in order to gain tempo. So this deck has a lot of bounce, and it of course has a lot of cheap 1-for-1 trades. So there's more counter magic in here. You get to run cards like Memory Lapse and Unified Will, which is really nice. But you also get to run like Gilded Drake, Into the Royal, Cyclonic Rift, Blink of an Eye. What else do we have for bounce? Snap, Brazen Borrower. There's Sower of Temptation and Cryptic Command. So a ton of bounce. And what that means is that one of the main disadvantages of playing Brea is that you don't get to play Jeweled Lotus. You don't get to play with basically a Black Lotus, but everyone else does. basically everybody else does, right? Unless you're playing the mirror match, like if they're playing Zur, if they're playing Edric, if they're playing, fill in the blank, the blue-red one commander that draws when you discard, just about anything, right? Like Urza, whatever. When they're playing Jeweled Lotus, basically they're playing Black Lotus and you're not. You just don't have it in your deck because it's just useless for Brea. Super frustrating. So it means that I was getting a little tired of that, and honestly, like it just feels bad when it's like you're not even playing the same format as your opponent. It's one thing like if somebody joins a cEDH advertised game and they don't bring a cEDH style deck, and then they get blown out, and like that can feel bad, but that's sort of a deck construction decision that person's choosing to make and then entering the fray. But when you just can't, when it's just like basically banned for you but not them, it feels pretty bad. So I just I just decided I needed to play a deck where I could run Jeweled Lotus, and I just didn't want to play Zur. It was too similar to Brea, and I thought, let's give Edric a try, and it's actually been extremely fun and doing very, very well. I think the win-loss rate, as you'll see, is somewhere in the realm of, it's approaching like 50-5. It's a little bit lower. I think it's like 45-5 or something like that. But we're coming up on 50-5. So basically a 90%, maybe 85% win rate. And some of those losses were earlier. The build is actually improved. So I'll note that the wins have gone up. So anyway, Jeweled Lotus is a funny one though in this deck because it actually ended up replacing a mana source. There's a green elf who taps for colorless. He's a snow elf, and Jeweled Lotus is basically taking that slot. He's the weakest of all the mana elves, and not critical to this deck at all. And it feels like maybe turn 1 Edric is worth not playing a turn 2 Edric, essentially. And there could be other cuts that are made to put him back in, but for now he's out because, honestly, the list feels really tight. There are a few, of course we get Talisman of Curiosity to go along with Arcane Signet and Simic Signet. I think back in the day all I had was Simic Signet. Now we've got all three of these 2-drops that function like basically Birds of Paradise, which is fantastic because by balancing your mana out between the different creatures, lands, and artifacts, it means this deck's a lot less susceptible to somebody who shows up with a single-minded approach to attacking your deck. Like this deck, the thing about Brea is if somebody comes into the battle against Brea with a very heavy disenchant package, it doesn't always work. And if you come into the fight against Edric with a heavy anti-creature package, funny enough, it doesn't always work because the deck can still play similar control games to what Brea does because of the existence of a card like Winter Orb. And of course, the heavy counters can also just make it challenging to put your strategy into place. You still have to deal with horrendous things like Natural Order into Terastodon and such. So not as easy as it seems. Very resilient. So what kind of the mana base in Edric also very, very nice. There's 2 basic islands and a basic forest. So we're playing 1 prismatic vista here. So you can actually play effectively like an additional fetch land that you wouldn't get to play in Brea because you just can't afford to play that many basic lands. And it gives a little resilience against things like back to basics or blood moon effects or whatever. So kind of nice to have that. Also, the new set came out with both Boseiju and Adawara. And these, generally speaking, are lands that you, for the most part, you want to put your lands into play. You don't want to be discarding them. Boseiju is card disadvantage because it destroys a land and then allows the owner to search for a basic land type. Sorry, it destroys an artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land an opponent controls, and then allows them to search for a basic land, which is another reason actually to play basic lands, is just the existence of this card adding to Path to Exile and other things like that. But so this is card disadvantage, and of course Adawara is card disadvantage because it's a bounce spell. But in Edric, where you're less focused on on getting card. You can afford to give up card advantage in order to make tempo positive plays. Things like possibly spending, like if Edric's out, this thing costs 1 green to activate, so it's effectively an additional Nature's Claim that can kill, you know, Soul Rings and stuff, and Gaia's Cradles and such, and, you know, Mishra's Workshops. So you have the ability to do that and replace them with a basic land, going down in cards, but possibly up in tempo. And if it's something that's a problem for you, that's obviously well worth it. You'll make up for the cards with Edric's ability anyway. Or at least that's the plan. Now, there are some weird things that are not in here, things that haven't made the cut. Most of the, I guess, the usual suspects are here. There's a new Avamaya Cradle of Growth is just a nice land to have. Turns these basic lands in Otawara into dual lands. Other than that, you know, it can allow you to get green mana out of like a strip mine or something if you haven't used a strip mine yet. But it can also be helpful when you have burned through, you've actually fetched out all of your targets. You might draw like Verdant Catacombs and you've already gotten all your forests or something. That can happen. There is one, Rimewood Falls is in here, the Snowland. It does come into play tapped. It's not great, but if you time it correctly, it's very little drawback, and the ability to have just one more dual land is probably worth it. So I anticipate it making the cut indefinitely, but we'll see. But for now, it stays. So what's not in here? So the most obvious one that's not in here is Mystic Sanctuary. There's actually a number of regrowth effects in the deck. You've got Internal Witness, you've got regrowth itself, and there's Snapcaster. And so, while that card's quite good, the problem is, in just a 2-color deck, there really just aren't enough islands to make it work. Even with 2 basic islands and then 3 other targets, you've got the Rimewood Falls, and then you've got both dual lands. You've got the Tropical Island and here, and the other land, Breeding Pool, right? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, only 5 only 5 islands rather. Nothing else is an island. And so without enough islands to fuel it, the Mystical Sanctuary just not reliable enough and can be frustrating. I mean, if I'm going to put a land into play tapped, I want it to be a dual land, is basically the thinking there. So this is basically replacing it. For the same reason, another card that's really obvious that's not in here is Vatican Shackles. It's hard to work, and of course if your opponent, let's assume they have Wasteland and Strip Mine, so we'll just take like 2 of these away, and then, you know, trying to run Shackles and Sanctuary off of exactly like 3 lands that are left over, just not exactly reliable. And with your fetches, sometimes, especially your green fetches, there are times when you want to fetch Dryad Arbor, just because you need another attacker, for example, or maybe like natural order fuel. And so it's not even guaranteed that you're going to be fetching the dual lands right away. And so there's just a lot of reasons why it's just too hard to use those cards in this deck. At least at the present time. I would love, like, oh man, the card I want to see of all lands that haven't been printed, I want them to finish this cycle. I just cannot wait for them to print whatever the blue one is. I just want all lands to be islands in addition to the other types. Is that it enables so much cool stuff. Shackles, obviously turning back on, Mystic Sanctuary being back on. It would be insane with High Tide. Island Walk, like, that card would be so busted. And it's so funny because the effect is so humble, and yet in blue, because blue's the best color in Magic, it would do so much. But alas, we're not there yet. So in the meantime, another effect that you don't see here that you might expect to see is there's no Ramanap or Crucible of Worlds. This is hard for me to not play those cards. I feel like the effect is just so good, especially if your opponent's does have lots of creature sweepers. Being able to just rebuild your mana base through consistently hitting lands, and of course potentially locking up a game really early and quick with a recursive Strip Mine or Wasteland is super valuable. But the thing is, there are a lot of times where you're going to win more easily by keeping your hands stocked and lots of mana in play, so that you can run counter magic. Excuse me. I'm gonna see if I can turn that down. My neighbor's playing some music there. Anyway, not that I mind it, but makes it hard to talk. Anyway, so really, what I was trying to say is that because Edric tends to feed you a lot of cards, you often have a glut of lands in your hand. It's kind of the opposite of Brea, whereas Brea is like very happy sort of with a smaller hand and having like a recursive effect from the graveyard, playing lands from the graveyard and drawing spells off the top. Brea's other than when, Necro's going. Edric is kind of like Brea when Necro's running, right? A lot of times. So you're just drawing so many cards that you just don't need to worry about, like, oh, replay my fetch land. You've got a handful of lands and you can just play the best land each turn. And so, and then as far as strip mine recursion goes, you're just kind of like looking at 3 or 4 counter spells in your hand. They have, maybe 1 card or 2 cards in their hand, and it's like, yeah, I mean, I could start strip mining them, but I really don't need to. And the second they tap out, I'm going to orb them anyway. So a lot of times it's just not necessary. Also, you have a tool in Edric you don't have in Brea, which is basically Armageddon. It's Elephantageddon over here. Trastodon getting cheated into play, destroying 3 mana sources, then potentially getting, bounced back to your hand, destroying more mana sources, and you leave them with an army, and so now you can't draw any cards, and then you rift them, and their army vanishes, and basically, you've won the game, right? That is not something, that's not even like a stretch, that's an actual game plan. Like, this deck can happily Green Sun Zenith for 9 and just go get Trastodon and blow somebody out. Not to mention Natural Order. So the deck just plays differently. Some of the significant additions to the deck. Oh, I suppose one other thing that's not in here that might jump out at you is Narset. Again, not as important when you're outdrawing your opponent to try to prevent them from drawing cards. In playing playing a non-creature like that doesn't draw you more cards, it kind of slows you down a little bit. It also has a problem where there's just so many lands, creatures in this deck. There's 25 creatures and 32 lands. So you're talking about 57 out of the 99 cards. So you can actually like activate Narset and just miss. And then the card feels pretty sad. So rather than play a card like that, it's still an insane card in blue, but might not necessarily be the best card in here. I have another card that's much more aggressive at suppressing your opponent in a different way. In the form of like Trigon Predator, right? So everything in the deck is, everything's a trade-off, right? So, but if any cut was going to made, possibly, I suppose you could cut like Brazen Borrower, but I'm not here with it. One of the other cards that's new that you might not expect, there's a couple of them. Kinnan Bonder Prodigy is just absolutely nuts. It's good enough to be a commander in terms of the fact that it just produces tons of mana and cards. So, and it actually just makes the cut in here very well. It makes all these alternate mana sources, double up, produce just gross amounts of mana. We get to run Feast and Famine again, another Winter Orb cheater, and of course another way to double mana. And of course you get to run Oko. But here's a card that you might not have expected, and that is Fall from Favor. So I'm not 100% sure this card will stay, but I actually have no reason to think that it won't stay. I'm just not 100% sure because it's too new in me playing it. However, I have loved drawing this card every single time it comes up. So what Fall from Favor does is it's a 3-mana enchantment that taps the creature that it's put on, and that creature does not untap unless... Oh, it taps the creature it's put on, and you become the monarch. And then that creature does not untap unless the creature controller is the monarch. So if you're the monarch, you, of course, draw an extra card at the end of your turn, which means that this card basically gives you another way, when the board is gummed up, to not only remove a potential blocker so you can attack and draw a bunch of cards, essentially killing it, but then it gives you a consistent way to draw cards. Like, let's say they then follow up with like a big sweeper that you can't deal with for some reason. Well, you're still drawing 2 cards per turn for the rest of the game, basically. And super powerful. But there are also commanders that... if you kill them, they're just going to come back. If you steal them, your opponent might have a solution, maybe not. But if you tap them and lock them down, sometimes sometimes theft will do it, but sometimes tapping it is good enough. And so there are commanders where this is just a good enough effect that you can just win the game very quickly on the strength of locking down a commander. First turn elf, second turn, they play their commander and they attack, like whatever. They play their commander and then you just fall from favorite. You have no creatures in play. You then draw an extra card, their commander's locked down, and now they're just in this horrible spot. Even if they disenchant the card, you remain the monarch. They have to hit you in order for you to lose monarch status, and then you can always gain it back. The other thing that's weird about this card is that, let's say I'm playing against mono blue, and I go first turn like Birds of Paradise, and then I go second turn fall from favor on my birds. I now become the monarch, so now I'm going to draw 2 cards per turn against a mono blue player, and on the next turn, because I'm the monarch, my enchanted creature untaps, so it doesn't even affect me at all. So it's just like a 3-mana Phyrexian Arena that some decks just can't interact with at all, can't be disenchanted, doesn't cost you any life, super easy to cast, right? So awesome card, works very well in a high creature, in a deck with 25 creatures plus a creature commander like that, 26 creatures, pretty good card. Anyway, other than that, I don't think there's anything particularly controversial or exciting in the deck. In terms of just requiring explanation, you'll see that like Trinket Mage is in the deck, but Fabricate is not. Things like that. Not as important for this deck to go get Soul Ring, of course. Like when you're playing any deck, like your draws with Soul Ring blow up. But it's not the most important. In Brea, like, you pretty much always just want to go get Soul Ring or one of your other potent artifacts, right? Like maybe your Crucible or whatever. In this deck, not so much, not that important. You can win games without ever drawing Winter Orb, without ever drawing Jite. You can win games without ever seeing a Soul Ring. It's fine. You've got basically dozen, not a dozen, but you've got essentially multiple Soul Rings. You've got Bloom Tender, Priest of Titania, Gaia's Cradle. Kinnan turns all of your creatures into Soul Rings, basically. So Garruk Wildspeaker acts like a Soul Ring. So just not as important in this deck to do that. And if you're going to spend the mana to tutor for a specific card in this deck, you might as well spend the mana to just continue to do what you normally do and then just draw extra cards. Basically, this deck doesn't use a scalpel, it uses a chainsaw, right? Where Brea like strategically, surgically brings the perfect card into its hand. This deck has a very finite amount of that. You can occasionally do it with Muddle. You can occasionally do it with Merchant Scroll, with Mystical Tutor, or with essentially National Order. But outside of that, this deck, and I guess Trinket Mage, Spellseeker, right? Like you can do some of that, but that's not like Brea is consistently doing that, and Edric is not. Edric is mostly like, let's just get a big flow of cards going, and somewhere in all that drawing, I'm going to find a way to win. And it does. And it does quite often. So let's take a look at some games. It's very, very fun deck to play. Very exciting. Also, for anybody looking at, I'm not sure. I don't know anything about. I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth here. I don't know anything about offline prices, but I would assume that this would be more affordable than Brea. I imagine Gaia's Cradle and Mishra's Workshop are probably close. But then you don't have cards like Imperial Seal and some of the other cards that are still in Brea, probably a lot harder to obtain and put together than some of the cards in here. But to be honest, as I said, I don't know. So if I'm completely wrong, well, I'm just not an offline player these days anymore, unless I can shuffle up the deck that I have, but the deck that I have is not complete, and I haven't spent any time trying to put it together, unfortunately. All right, so here you can see kind of the record recently from the 29th moving forward to the 6th. So basically a week, right? And you'll see here at the beginning I get a loss, and there's another loss, like a couple losses early on 430. There's 1 on 5-5, 2 on 5-5, 3 on 5-5, and then just, do I have any on 5-6? No losses at all today. So as I've been kind of getting my feel for the deck, tuning the deck, and then of course in some of these cases, my opponents just blew me out or had what they needed, and there was no beating it no matter what. There was no changing the deck and no changing the choices. There was just me losing, and that's going to happen sometimes in a high-powered format like this. But in general, as you can see, it's not that consistent in terms of the losses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the games on 5-6 because that's today that I'm making the video, and those are the games with this exact list. And no change to the list, other than I may have. I was just about to say that, but there's a chance there was one difference at one point starting the day, and then I had the elf that taps for colorless mana. So yeah, where is this guy? Boreal Druid. So I had Boreal Druid in here, and I did not have Brainstorm in the deck. And it kind of makes sense, honestly, in some ways, because Brainstorm is a little redundant. Like, you draw so many cards that like you almost don't need to see more cards. But Brainstorm is also one of the most craziest cards in Magic, as Brian admonished me, and not playing it doesn't make sense ever, basically. So I took his word for it, and ended up, I asked him for a suggestion on cuts, and he said, Boreal Druid's like one of the weakest cards in here. Totally right. So I just cut that and put the Brainstorm back in, and I think it'll be fine. So we'll run through the games. If Boreal Druid comes up, that should have been a Brainstorm. I don't remember when I switched it today. But other than that, everything else is the same. All right, so now we can take a look at some of these games. So first one, playing against Acadian Mage. And my opponent's playing the Reality Chip. And this is a bit of a problem for my opponent because this deck is loaded with creature theft and artifact theft and artifact removal. And the Reality Chip is all of those things. So it's very, very vulnerable to the... You would think that it'd be pretty safe against like blue-green, because in theory we don't have any like targeted removal. But in practice, actually, it's incredibly vulnerable to this deck. So opponent leads off with Island Opal. Of course, I was going first. I get the turn 2 Edric start. So we'll just go ahead and take that. And I use Windswept Heath here. If Misty Rainforest was a blue, like a non-blue-green land, if this had been like, say, Flooded Strand or something, I actually would have used the Strand and protected the Heath. And the reason that you protect your green lands in Edric is because green lands fetch Dryad Arbor, and you don't know if you would like to get Dryad Arbor for any reason, so you want to leave yourself that option for as long as possible. But here, I use that one because it's obviously the Misty Rainforest is the most flexible land in my deck, so flexible fetch rather. All right, so turn 2 Edric going first, always a beating for blue control deck. Opponent does play a blocker, of course, but that was a bit of a trap if they don't have a counter spell here. They might actually have the free commander counter that counters non-creature spells, but been tapping out with that in mind, but obviously Sower doesn't care. So my top card is a Lotus, doesn't suck. I cannot play that off the top. I have to actually equip this for the ability to play off the top goes. So we'll just go ahead and now, I don't know if you noticed that, but this was a bug I noticed in this game. It was an unfortunate bug. There was a flicker when I hit my opponent with Edric where it actually showed me my opponent's library and then flickered back to my library. I don't know what causes that other than the fact that I'm controlling my opponent's Reality Chip. And for a split second, it's trying to show me what's on his deck. So I'm actually getting information that I probably shouldn't have. So I did my best to like kind of not look at what's coming from the top of my opponent's library, and not let that influence my decisions. And to be honest, like when you're this far ahead, you really don't need any edge. Like you just kind of have the game all wrapped up already, right? All right, so I'm going to fetch here, and I decide that given the amount of cards that I'm drawing, I'd rather just get some extra blue mana. Now I have 2 counters before I tap my out. I fetched prior to attacking, so I had 2 counters up. If I attack with the elf and I don't play a land, then I only have one counter up. So I also didn't want the top card of my library, so I shuffled that off. You saw how it flickered and it showed me the top of his library there. It's kind of unfortunate. And yeah, so here I've got, I figure one counter is probably enough, so I'm just going to get some more mana. I don't necessarily need to draw a Rec Sage. You see my opponent's playing the Reality Chip, and I'm shuffling a Rec Sage away, possibly here. I figure they probably can like counter here maybe, but then that's fine because I still have a counter ready to go on their turn. And as long as this isn't mana drain, I'm not super worried about it. Turns out it's Flusterstorm, so I'm really happy to see that go because it's obviously hard to counter into a Flusterstorm. So my Zenith is gone and I'm done for the turn. And it's nice having the Rec Sage like as a backup. If my opponent did have, say, Bounce or like Psionic Blast or some kind of removal for Sower, it would be nice to be able to just then Rec Sage their Reality Chip and continue on with my Edric game plan. Opponent plays Training Grounds, which makes the Reality Chip equipped for a single blue, which is pretty cool, but not super helpful here. You notice I haven't even had time to equip the thing. I mean, it's a future sight, and I'm not even bothering to equip it. That's how good Edric, of course, the constant brain geyser basically is. My opponent, of course, revealed some kind of artifact there. Once again, I just don't. I try not to pay too close of attention to what it is. All right, so here I can play Garrick and still leave 2 mana up for a counterspell into just 1 blue. This looks really good for me. Even if they have like Spell Pierce here, I can just pay it and then untap my lands and have a counter ready to go. So I'd like to do that. And of course, if they don't counter it, then I can potentially, if they don't counter it, then I could untap lands and play like Hatchling and have a counter up. They play Commandeer though, exiling Paradigm Shift and Solve the Equation. And I'm kind of nervous here because if they have a Spell Pierce now, I'm actually just gave them a Garrick. I gave them a Soul Ring. It's going to be hugely problematic for me. So I do have to try to counter this. Fortunately, they don't have anything, so I just untap here. I could play Spiketail Hatchling under the premise that it will be good enough to stop whatever they're going to do next turn. And thinking about it, I decide that's more than likely acceptable. They've missed land drops, so like the best thing I can... this will punish me if they do something along the lines of draw a Mana Crypt or an Ancient Tomb and then cast like Time Twister to get back into the game. But outside of that sort of corner case, there's very little that punishment that occurs here. And oops, except for my opponent having another free counterspell, Mind Break Trap, and now I've actually opened the door for them to play any land in Time Twister and get back into the game. Fortunately, they don't have it, and then at this point the game is effectively over. I'm gonna go ahead and yeah, Thieving Skydiver, their Mox Opal. They can't even tap it in response because it doesn't tap for mana on their side of the board. But on my side, the Jeweled Lotus Mox Opal Reality Chip combo means that I just snagged another mana source. And then I'm gonna go and play Sword. And of course I can counter with Opal Llanowar, so we're gonna equip the Sword using 2 more mana. And then I'm like, this is the first game of the day, by the way, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need coffee. Like, I'm not even awake. I'm playing this game like half awake. I feel so stupid though when I equip the Thieving Skydiver right there. Edric's like, it doesn't matter. You're fine. Your opponent's totally mana screwed this game. My opponent says, lol, I need mana. I say, coffee is real life mana, and he says facts. LOL. So, fair enough. It was a good-natured opponent, obviously getting just totally hosed by the shuffler. So, you know, obviously at this point we're just gonna finish like tearing up the opponent, take him down to 1 mana or 1 life here. Top of my library, I'll just float it over there, and from here it's pretty trivial, right? I'm just doing, this is all just shenanigans at this point. So, end my turn without even having to discard, and my opponent's still on 2 lands. At this point I've gotten 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lands. So we're not going to treat that as the most amazing game in the world, but you know, it's a good start for the day. And let's see if we can get date and time today. There we go. All right, so we'll move on to Valiant Toast, and the opponent had a really good attitude. It's nice to play somebody with a pleasant demeanor like that. All right, so we'll get started here. You can see another excellent draw. Playing against Magda, Braz, and Outlaw, this thing can be really difficult to deal with. A commander that produces tons of mana and then produces a big threat can be a real problem. There's so many, like, it's an interesting commander, kind of a broken one, honestly. Like, I definitely do not enjoy facing this commander very much. As a perfect example of the kind of thing that Brea might struggle with, because it's really hard to contain, certainly, your opponent. In Brea, they're going to just keep swinging in and getting more and more treasures, and then eventually they get 5 and they put something stupid into play, and it just gets completely out of hand very quickly. Whereas in Brea, at least you can throw a blocker into play and at least make them work for it. But also you have bounce, so if they do tutor up something crazy, there's a good chance that you can just put it back into their hand, and then it'll be forever before they can cast it. Of course, I mean, this isn't like, this is a top tier hand, but it is not like, stone cold nuts. Like, this isn't a vintage level hand or anything. But we will be getting some of those later. All right, so we'll just kind of run through this. Opponent, I'm going first. So because I'm going first, my opponent goes Gemstone Caverns and imprints a mountain. And when I see this, I'm thinking, that actually, they only have 4 cards in hand. Is it a mulligan? So I might actually be able to just wasteland into a victory here. It's a little risky, but it might work out. Like, they might have kept just the right amount of mana. They probably have another land, but they might not have another one beyond that. And that could mean that Magna doesn't come down. So I'm going to go for it here, and we'll see what happens. So that's it for turn 1. Opponent does have a mana, and a man. Plays a Skirk Prospector. So this is a little risky for me, only because I don't have another mana as well. My opponent could return the favor here. Wasteland, Butcher Mystic, and I'm in bad shape. I'm also not like glutted with mana to deal with the fact that Magda's about to come down. Fortunately, this isn't a dwarf, so they're not going to start producing treasures right away, at least. All right, so opponent plays Magda, and if you don't know what Magda does, whenever a dwarf becomes tapped, he creates a treasure token. Dwarves get +1/+0, and sack 5 treasures, search your library for an artifact or dragon, and put that card into the battlefield and shuffle. So it's a tinker in time. I actually thought about blocking there just to restrict their mana a little bit further, but obviously I immediately discarded that. I don't have enough mana to play games like that. Chrome Mox off the top, not great. Would have rather had a land, but Chrome Mox is too valuable in Edric to not play here, so I don't feel guilty about drawing it. Just wish it had been a land, so I just kind of hold it in my hand here. This backfires if they play Wheel of Fortune, but otherwise is probably fine. I don't necessarily want to give my opponent targets for multiple targets for mana for artifact destruction that might kill multiple things. So. All right, opponent plays Smuggler's Copter. So now he's got a way to tap Magda to crew the Copter. That will produce treasures, but I can't. It means he doesn't have to attack in. Of course, developing this way meant that there was no drawback from my opponent attacking in here. So they're gonna go ahead and get in for the damage, I believe. Nope, he just sits on it. He's just playing it safe. So fair enough. It actually makes a ton of sense because now he's got a 3/3 blocker also. So I can't just like play Edric and attack for 1. Without, just running right into the Copter, right? So I drew the tutor there, which is something. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just Spellseeker and just get that Copter. I don't want my opponent having that convenient way to produce more and more treasures. So I'm just going to get that thing off the table right now. Opponent does animate it, of course, to get a treasure, and then it dies. I go ahead and, because I drew the Mystical Tutor, I go ahead and play the Chrome Mox. I'm going to go ahead and print one of the cards here, and then I want Mystical Tutor available. So I choose to imprint Merchant Scroll. Despite the fact that Scroll does get bounce, I keep the bounce in my hand because I'm thinking if my opponent can cheat something out, I do want to bounce it. Otherwise, I'm okay right now, and just having the Mystical Tutor option is a little bit more flexible. So my opponent plays Lightning Greaves here, which is okay, but as you can see, like, quite different playing against Edric than Brea, because I've just got these 1/1s laying around that actually make it hard for my opponent to swing in and do the thing that his deck's trying to do. Opponent gets a Dwarven Grunt, so he can move the Greaves over and then actually attack for 2 and produce 2 mana here if he wants to. I don't know if he misses the play or what. I 100% think he should have moved the Greaves over and attacked with just this, and then moved the Greaves back to Magda and just got himself an extra treasure and traded off the creature. But my opponent chooses to play it a little bit safer, and with that, I'm going to Mystical Tutor. Going to go get Natural Order here, and Natural Order, I'm going to know my way into some Elephants. So I actually tap this way. I sack the bird rather than the Elvish Mystic because my opponent has lots of 1 toughness creatures, and having blockers is good. And so I just end up taking out Greaves and then both red sources. I take out Greaves, of course, because I'm holding Blink of an Eye, and I might like to be able to bounce something. All right, so clearly I'm not going to attack in. So you notice this is the thing that's neat about the Edric deck. Just like the Brea deck, it can win without playing the commander. But if it plays the commander, of course, it's easier to win. So if you get that window, you take it. But you don't have to. All right, so I'm going to attack in with Trest on here. This is, of course, exactly what I want to happen. My opponent triple blocks, and then with all the bounce in the deck, how about if I just draw a card here and destroy 2 elephants, landing myself onto a Gaia's Cradle. Now, I'm trying to think of how my opponent can get out of this, and one of the main ways would be some kind of something involving Wheel of Fortune. So for that reason, I'm not going to hide the fact that I drew a Gaia's Cradle. I'm just going to play it there, even though it does me no good. And if my opponent wants to Wasteland the Cradle here and then just do nothing else, I'm okay with that. I can play Edric next turn and then smash in with Trestodon, and we can get this party started that way. And in fact, what my opponent does do is draw Cavern of Souls and realize that they're just too far behind the power curve, and they scoop it up. Their Brazen Outlaw was not brazen enough to attack into my 1/1, so just the power of a 1/1 here was enough. I do think my opponent, they could have attacked with both and picked up a couple treasures and had like 4 mana this turn, which is just crazy. Which just tells you how good that commander is, but fortunately, no dice. So Valiant Toast valiantly proceeds to enter the second game here. And unfortunately, once again, it's Magda, and I've got to mulligan again, just like I did before. So here's a hand that's very sketchy, and you can see I have Boreal Druid still in instead of Brainstorm, and it's really kind of hard to say. It's not clear that Boreal Druid is better or worse here. Of course, Druid, if it doesn't get bolted and I draw a land, that's better. But if it's Brainstorm and I can Brainstorm into mana, that's better too. So it's a question of whether or not I want to keep this. And if I do, I'm obviously just tucking the Trestodon in the deck. This is already a mulligan, basically a double mulligan with the Winter Orb. And so I'm trying to decide if I want to keep this or not. And I think I decide to keep it, yeah. And my opponent leads off with, Lotus. Lotus into Magda, but this is incredibly ballsy, right? Opponent has Magda, but no mana at all. But they're going to start producing mana by attacking. Now, unfortunately, there's a bug with Lotus where sometimes, not always, sometimes it doesn't clear your mana pool after you play your commander and you change phases, and this affects my opponent. And it ends up mattering quite a bit here. I top deck a land here, which is great. So now the Boreal Druid's looking a lot better, of course, than Brainstorm would have been. Opponent attacks in, and I almost block, and it might have been correct to block there and just do it, take it. But I decided I'm going to wait like one more turn, and unfortunately, in some ways, I'm kind of glad I did, because if my opponent actually runs out Soul Ring into Torque, and if my opponent has like any red source, then blocking there would have meant that they could just replay their commander on the next turn, but it would have hurt my development. So, so I think this turned out to be correct. And of course, after you see the top deck, it's 100% correct, because look what I get to do: Mana Vault, Jace, bounce your creature, your commander, and now my opponent doesn't have any red. So hopefully they don't draw any red mana, and then this game's just over. And I ask them if they will please respect the fact that they don't really have red mana and not play their commander here. And my opponent's a good sport and chooses to do exactly that. They do play Mirror the Forebearers here, which will allow them to copy a creature in play of type Dwarf for a singular mana until end of turn. But I'm hoping that they don't get much in the way of targets. And of course you can see I'm holding Oko here. I get to Jace, and then once you start Jacing, well, you know how that works. I get to Nature's Claim the Soul Ring and sit on a counter spell here, and so I will, and my opponent just scoops. If they didn't scoop, if they had a play, I'm gonna Unified Will it, they don't have a play, I will just lose cards and tempo bounce the Liquid Metal Torque, so that on my turn, I'm going to just make up for the cards anyway with Jace, and we'll just drive on. If I had 2 green, I wouldn't bounce the Torque. I would regrowth the Claim and kill it, but in this case, yeah, my opponent's just super frustrated with the glitch because he has to click OK every single phase, saying, yeah, I don't want to empty my mana pool. And I've been looking for how to turn that off, and it looks like Magic Online removed the option. Like, you can't tell it to stop warning you about mana, and you have that bug with the Lotus, and it's just the most frustrating thing. I'm still running the Lotus because I'm willing to deal with the frustration when it comes up, and it doesn't always come up, but it's just miserable. And my opponent was obviously behind, and I don't blame him for just scooping there at all. In fact, I never blame my opponents for scooping for any reason, but in that case especially. So once again, we move into the third game, and I've got a very nice draw going first here. Oh no, going second here, excuse me. My opponent's going first. And then leads off with this Elixir of Immortality. I'm not sure what the obsession is with this card. I kind of am. I remember the days when every single deck ran a Felden's Cane, and this is just like Felden's Cane plus. So I totally get it. It just seems so sexy to be able to like reuse all your cards. And in this case, it turns out this acts like almost a mana source because it fuels Mox Opal. But it's a little silly too. All right, so this is kind of a weird one. I top deck the Jiraga Tree Speaker. So if I play a first turn Jiraga, I could actually just block and trade with this Liberated Dwarf, where my opponent on turn 2 plays Magda Brazen Outlaw. I block and trade with this thing, and then they'll get 1 treasure, but possibly that's it. On the other hand, if I lead off with the bird, I can get Edric down, and I don't have to block and trade directly. Well, my opponent will get a few opportunities to generate treasures, but I will get the ability to possibly generate cards myself, maybe get to the point where I can play Sword of Fire and Ice. So with all that kind of in mind, I decided to lead off with the bird instead of the Jiraga Tree Speaker. My opponent plays Magda and swings in, and of course I can't trade. They get a treasure and then immediately use it to play Spark Mage. I'm like, oh gosh, that's a problem. So whenever Spark Mage deals damage to a player, you may have Spark Mage deal 1 damage to target creature that player controls. So if I don't block with the bird, it's like Sword of Fire and Ice, like on a really small scale. That's kind of a nasty card, and being a dwarf, it's going to produce mana for my opponent as well. It's just all around nasty. So I top deck Mana Leak. I'm really happy to see it here because now I can at least play something to block the Spark Mage. But this is a rough situation. Opponent plays Treasure Vault, where you can put mana into it to create treasure tokens. Kind of an interesting card to play. And then Jessica's Will. And I thought about whether or not I want to counter this or not. The problem is that they would get 5 mana. I think you get to choose one or both. Yeah, they would get 5 mana and then essentially draw 3. So add 5 mana to your mana pool and draw 3 cards is a bit much. So I'm going to counter that thing. And then I was trying to figure out which counter to use because I can Mana Leak here, of course, because my opponent didn't attack yet. But Mana Leak can counter creatures, and I'm not sure what I'm going to need. Muddle, of course, can be used to transmute and do certain things. So I'm really unclear on what counter to use here, and I think about it and decide I'm going to use the Muddle. The Mana Leak I might need to actually counter a creature more so than if I can find, like I was hoping they'd send in Magda, and then I could just counter it on the way down and then deal with it. Obviously, the Spark Mage comes in, so they get 2 treasure tokens. I think here they should have attacked with all 3. It does give me the choice to block Magda, but if I block Magda and I lose my bird to the Spark Mage, that's a good deal for my opponent. They should have taken that deal. They would have 1 more treasure here. Thankfully, I top deck Mana Confluence here, which allows me to play Garruk and then just make an elephant blocker. Sometimes you just need an elephant. And of course, my opponent sends in. So they do attack in a strange way. They Liberated Dwarf is at the Garruk, but then the Magda's at face, which allows me to actually protect Garruk. I think that's a bit of a mistake. Opponent is up to 4 treasure tokens though, which is pretty bad. And then uses Treasure Vault to make exactly, I think, 1 treasure token. And then sacks all 5 during combat to search for an artifact or dragon and put it onto the battlefield. So This is kind of like before damage is done. And I'm like, what is going on here? They get Bogarted and Hellkite, so now they get to divide 5 damage however they want. So probably the best division of damage would be 2 to Garrick, 1 to the birds, that's 3. And then just 1 to the beast and 1 to my face. And then just let the liberated dwarf trade with the beast token. But they still end up with a dragon, a Magda, and I lose all of this. I think that's probably the choice they need to make. Something goes horribly wrong with their clicking, and nothing dies, and I have no explanation for it, and neither does my opponent. So I say, hey, I can pretend that all those permanents are dead and just try to play, and he's like, nah, it's fine, just play with what you got. So playing with what I got means just winning the game on the spot, right? So I just regrowth the muddle, which is the other reason I didn't mind using it, and yeah, I just take his dragon and chill out, and now he's got a Magda, a Gilded Drake that can't really attack profitably, a Magda that can attack well, two mana, and you can get a 3rd mana, and my opponent scoops. So I kind of felt bad about that game. I don't know what went wrong there. So Valiant Toast salutes me, toasts me, and jumps into another game. So once more with Magda. Is this the same game that we played? This might have been the same. Yep, that's the same game. Okay, let's go to the next one. So this would be. I wonder if I skipped the middle game. I think I might have skipped the middle game. Let's take a look. If I skipped it, I apologize. If not, I'll jump out of it real quick. Yeah, I did skip this game. All right, so here, once again, this is currently brainstorming my deck. I'm really on the fence about that change here. But obviously, like, the Boreal Druid seems even better against a deck like Magda. So. Alright, so I'm going to go first turn. I'm going to Polluted Delta, get a Tropical, and play Boreal Druid. The only reason I did that and I didn't play a Forest is that if I top deck a Mana Drain, I want to be able to play it. So I want to have a dual land in play on turn 1 so I can play Mana Confluence on turn 2, or Prismatic Vista and potentially Mana Drain that way. And a non-dual land just won't do it. So, alright, Magda's coming down. I decided that for tempo purposes, I'm more than happy to just force a will here. Keeps it out of play. My opponent's not generating extra treasure tokens. Has no reason to attack there. And it just buys me a ton of time. Of course, they have a Barbarian Ring, so I do have to worry about them getting Threshold at some point and killing Edric. But that's a long ways down the road. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to Spellseeker and go get Mana Drain. Opponent plays Dwarven Miner. Also a potential problem, but not as much of a problem for this deck as it would be maybe for Brea. But you notice they also missed a land drop. I just play another basic land against the Dwarven Miner that's in play there. And with 3 mana, I'm going to go ahead and cast Edric. I feel like I can sit on Mystical Tutor and probably deal with whatever they do here. And sitting on a counterspell with the Dwarven Miner over there, if they play a land and then just kill my lands, then that counterspell does nothing anyway. So it makes more sense to spend my mana this way, at least in my mind. Opponent just Galvanic Blasts Edric right off the board. Makes perfect sense. Plays a Skirk Prospector. Nothing I can do about that. But I can Mystical Tutor here and put that Boreal Druid to much better use as Reborn as an elephant, and my opponent knows what's coming and scoops. Of course, I'm going to target their land, and one of my lands most likely, and then just end up with an elephant with a 9/9 and a 3/3. My opponent ends up with 2 3/3s, but no mana whatsoever. I'll just kill the Mystic Confluence here. Anyway, so we move on to the next game. So that was kind of in the middle of the games there. I somehow skipped it. And we're on the last game against Valiant Toast anyway. And another Magda game. And I've got a very good start once more. And this time my opponent is going first again. Plays a Dwarven Scorcher. So sack Scorcher to deal 1 damage to target creature unless that creature's controller has it deal 2 damage to them. So basically sacrifice your dwarf to do nothing, because your opponent's going to obviously not let you kill their creature. They're going to get shocked. In a 40 life format, the chances of that being useful are none. However, it's very useful as a turn 1 dwarf, would possibly turn 2 Magda and start making treasures, which of course is quite scary, but my opponent misses a land drop here. Instead gets a Springleaf Drum, just hits me for damage, and That's about all the time they get. Now I get to play Edric. Of course, this means that I have Guardianship up, but because they have Drum, if they play Magda now, they don't actually have to attack into Edric to get their treasure. They can just tap for mana to get their treasure, assuming they draw land. Like, if they draw the land and then play Magda versus using the Drum pre-Magda. But I can see why they kept, and they don't draw a land, so it's just kind of costs them a treasure here. I am, of course, drawing almost nothing here, so I'm just going to just play Garrick and make an elephant. Pretty much, my opening hand is all I've got to play this game with, but my opening hand's still very strong because this is Edric. And I decided, you know what, I probably was too aggressive about the way I just used Garrick. I probably should have attacked first and seen what my opponent did. More than likely, my opponent's not going to block. They need mana bad, and if they do block and I kill this off, then I don't have to worry about that. And from there, I can, even though Guardianship would have been down, I'll have so much mana that I can just replay Edric trivially. So I realized that after the fact, after I make the beast, and I attack in and draw Thieving Skydiver. So, darn it. I might have liked to have untapped Thieving, and had Thieving Skydiver either on board or ready to go. But the more I think about it, the more I realize, like, you know what, I don't just want a 2-1 flyer. I want a 2-1 flyer that steals just Springleaf Drum. So I probably would have made the same play regardless. All right, so my opponent's obviously doing some good stuff here. Produces a bunch of mana, makes this Reckoner Bank Buster. Comes into play with 3 charge counters on it. 2 mana, you tap it and draw a card. So it's a Jam-Day Tome for 2 mana to play and 2 mana to tap. And it doesn't have Summoning Sickness because, I mean, it's an artifact vehicle. So it unless you make it a creature and crew it, then it would have Summoning Sickness. But draw a card, and then if there are no charge counters on it, create a treasure token and a 1/1 colorless pilot that crews this vehicle for free. So this card's going to draw 3 cards, make 3 1/1. Oh, so you draw 3 cards, and then after you draw your last card, you get a 1/1 that can pilot it, and you can start beating down for 4. Pretty good card. I of course try to Fierce Guardianship the card because I'd prefer to Thieving Skydiver the Drum and not this thing. Opponent has Deflecting Swat, so no counter for me. So he gets his Jam-Day Tome into play. And then I top deck Sower, so just amazing top deck right there. I get to Sower and take Magda, which is a big problem card, obviously. Opponent responds by crewing the Reckoner Bankbuster, which is clever. They realize that once they lose Magda, their dwarves lose 1 point of power, so they won't be able to crew. So they need to crew so that they can block right away. Excuse me. So they crew up, and of course, because they'll get 2 treasure tokens immediately. I just untap and then play Skydiver and steal the Drum. Deciding that tempo is more important than cards. I could wait and steal the Bankbuster next turn, but I would rather take it right now. I cannot attack in really effectively into a 4/4, so I'm just going to wait. But now my opponent has some temporary mana and a decent amount of it, but they do have a problem here if they can't kill the Sower. So they draw a card looking for a solution, and they do not find it. And that was about it for my opponent. That was their chance to find the answer. Now I get to send in for a bunch of damage. Of course, I've got Drum and Magda going. My opponent's combo. And I don't know if he chooses to block or not here. I don't think so. No. Well, my opponent chooses to do a scoop. So, makes perfect sense. He says, hey, looks like the deck is... His deck's more built for 4-player, and he can't keep up. Nice build, which is nice. And understandable. So, obviously, even if my opponent, double blocks Edric here, I still draw 3 cards. Replay Edric. It's a joke to play it at this point. Spit out an elephant. Create Edric again. Create creating treasure tokens. It's just pretty bad for my opponent. Who knows what the next 3 cards would have been, but surely it would have gone from bad to worse, right? So that's it for Valiant Toast. Acadian Mage shows back up to play again. Maybe get some vengeance from the first game. And I've got a 1-land hand against Jin-Gitaxias, One land against mono blue, not really where you want to be, but I have some reasons to keep it. Obviously, the first turn bird's very, very good. I am going second, which means I have a couple opportunities to draw land. And then I've got this I've got Brazen Borrower that can possibly interact with something like if my opponent like Lotuses out the Jingatoxis. But I've also got this Fall from Favor, and as I said in the intro, Fall from Favor on my own bird does not prevent it from untapping. So what I have here is I've got Trinket Mage to possibly get like Soul Ring or Crypt and recover from a slow start, along with a card drawing engine that doesn't require me to resolve my commander, possibly. So for all those reasons, I just decided I'm going to go ahead and keep. Very risky if my opponent has a way to interact. Or a fast start. Unfortunately, they do. Another island, a Mana Crypt, and then plays Aetherflux Reservoir, a really interesting choice. So that can, at 40 life, that can very quickly be scary. It's nice to see that they have the Crypt, and hopefully their Crypt helps me out. Because if they get to 50, I'm doomed. And thankfully, going second worked out in my favor. I get to draw Cavern of Souls right off the top like that. So I am going to go ahead and just go get my mana and I'm going to play it because I don't know. This looks like, to me, this indicates possibly combo. With possibly combo going on, I really want to get more mana into play. And if I can get enough mana into play from there, I might be able to I'll be fine for the rest of the game. But I kind of want to match my opponent's Mana Crypt is what it comes down to. One plays Command Beacon and Clever Impersonator, gaining a little bit of life. They lost the flip, so they're at 38. And then they impersonate my Trinket Mage quite cleverly and get themselves a Soul Ring. So now they've got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this thing costs 7. So problem. And also they have a blocker for Edric. So I definitely respect that play. All right, so I top deck another land, which is just wonderful, allowing me to cast Garrick and then untap my lands thanks to the Mana Crypt I fetched earlier. And then from there, I can't get in. I don't feel comfortable about trying to get in with with any play here and taking my counterspell down and then just letting them resolve their 7-drop. Even though I could bounce it later, it's too scary for that thing to come down at all. So I sit on Counter Magic plus Brazen Borrower here. I'm also keenly aware that they're at 40 and they have a lot of mana. They still have a decent number of cards. And so if I don't deal with the Reservoir, there's a chance that I could just take 50 points of damage out of nowhere here. So hopefully they lose the flip. But in the meantime, I don't really want to bank on them losing the flip and not having a way to kill me. And this would give me at least a way to bounce that they can't interact with, right? So, well, I mean, they can. I mean, they can stop the petty theft. But I have a counter to back it up. Like, I have just enough blue mana to do both. All right, so opponent goes for... And, of course, if they do go for the play that I'm kind of hoping that they make, which is Gatoxis, and I can counter it, which I do, thankfully, that buys me a little time, and then I can also stall on the Brazen Borrower Reservoir, like slowing them down a good bit, because do they want to develop? Do they want to play this Reservoir again? What do they want to do? Opponent attacks for 2. I am totally good with that. I just let Garrick lose a couple counters. I could trade here, but I'd love to swing back and draw a card with Edric. I think them attacking for 2 there is probably incorrect. Just giving me the choice doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, I bounce the Reservoir back to their hand. Now I've got the Fairy in the exile zone. Top deck a Simic Signet, really nice here. This card, it's funny how good just having the 2 mana artifacts actually is, even in a deck loaded with birds and stuff. And it's for this exact reason, just converting colorless into colored mana, converting Cavern of Souls mana into mana that I can spend on other things. It's just all good. All right, so obviously I'm going to use Cavern of Souls here, though, so that I can play Edric, attack, draw a card. Finding a strip mine, which is really great. If I strip mine, notice that they're kind of hurting on blue. If I strip mine a blue, because right now they could potentially just go Ancient Tomb, cast their commander again, and I don't have a lot going on. So if I strip mine their blue now, though, I can possibly stave that off for a bit. So I am going to go ahead and do that, I think. No, I know what I chose to do. I'm planning to do that. But I realize, so the reason I don't do that is because I have Muddle the Mixture in my hand. So I don't strip mine right away. What I'm going to actually do is increase my card drawing engine. And the reason is, if they do Ancient Tomb their guy out, I have Muddle and I can transmute into Gilded Drake and possibly just win in that way. So instead what I choose to do is fall from favor their Trinket Mage. So the Trinket Mage will stop attacking my Garruk. It's no longer capable of blocking my 2 creatures or pressuring my Garruk. And I'm now the Monarch. And so now I can just start drawing 2 cards per turn. So we will, on top of whatever I can steal with Edric. So opponent just has Sculpting Steel. I can't muddle that. And so they now have 2 Soul Rings. So they're ready to cast Jin Gitaxias on the next turn if they want to. And of course they can play their artifact that I bounced, possibly. Instead, look at this giant spell. What is this? Walking Ballista. Cannot muddle that. I'm thinking, oh, this is horrible. So X equals 3, so they can shoot like Bird, Edric, and they can also block. Or they can just leave it there as a blocker and possibly shoot, like block whatever I attack with. Shoot Garruk down. Like there's a lot of options that my opponent has here that they're all kind of bad. Instead, what my opponent chooses to do, and I do not understand. I figure once they shoot Garruk, that Garruk is dead, which is fine. If they do kill the Garruk, I lose the Soul Ring basically, but I still get to attack and draw 2 more cards because I fall from favored their Trinket Mage and it can't block. So it's not great for me, but it's not horrible. Then they change their mind though. Garruk, Edric. I think this combination is probably the worst. The best combo would have been, if they were going to kill Edric at all, would have been to kill Birds of Paradise and then shoot Edric during combat so that I don't get cards. But they choose to do it this way, so not great for them, actually. All right, so I draw Priest of Titania, but I'm going to just play an uncounterable Edric here. All right, and then I'm only going to get 1 card here, but of course I've got another one coming at the end of my turn. So we'll see what this card is first. And it's a Rift, which is really nice. So I go ahead and strip mine an island and untap and play an uncounterable Priest of Titania here. And once again, I'm just going to sit on Muddle the Mixture. I've now got a Rift up, and I'm going to snag another free card for nothing. All right, opponent's got the mana crypt going. So my opponent's loaded with mana, but and I'm feeling good about having the Rift just because if they try to play the artifact and start spinning out a bunch of cards to generate enough life to nuke me for 50, I can bounce that thing at some point if it feels like things are going that direction. So anyway, one plays Mishra's Workshop, which is just really getting absurd. And then I think there's an ordering problem here where they make they play Kappa Cannoneer. It has Improvise. They don't have anything to improvise with, but it has Ward 4. So when an artifact enters the battlefield under its control, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it cannot be blocked this turn. So it grows out of control, and it can be played cheaply, and like with alternate casting cost, and it's unblockable. So it's a way to kill Garruk, and a way to block my board, which is really interesting. Plus with Ward 4, I can't exactly Rift that thing. In fact, there's really nothing I can do about that thing. So there it stays. Opponent plays, then does play the Reservoir. Of course, this acts as a +1/+1 counter on the Cannoneer. For them, I might have gone the other way, possibly to gain the life. And I mean, I'm not sure the difference between 5/5 and 6/6 is significant, but I can see why they would have, made this play also. I'm going to shut down Jin Gitaxias for the moment as it comes up. All right. So, top deck Cradle. Yum. All right, with Cradle, I can just play an Elvish Mystic essentially for free. And we're just going to go ahead and get the Cradle down. And now this is a very fine time, in my estimation, to go ahead and just Rift. The Fall from Favor will fall from the Trinket Mage. And of course, the Trinket Mage is actually Clever Impersonator. So my opponent could potentially cleverly impersonate my Garruk and do some other unfortunate things with that. But still, I'm going to generate a lot of tempo, and I get to draw some extra cards. And with that in mind, now's the time. Otherwise, unfortunately and fortunately, I don't have to target the Kappa Cannoneer here with Overload. I just bounce everything. So, all right, cleared the way here. Opponent's got 8 cards in hand. So I'm thinking about whether or not I want to spend the rest of my mana. I've got some mana floating. I can run it into cast the Brazen Borrower, or I could transmute Muddle, both of which seem like reasonable plays. Like, for example, I could transmute into into Regrowth, and then Regrowth and Strip Mine the island. But I decide I probably got enough mana with just the Cradle and the birds and stuff to just see what I draw first and then make a decision. So I go ahead and send in for 3 cards. Mana Leak, Arbor Elf, and another land. And so I just end the turn. And the reason that I do that is because I am intending to potentially play both Mana Leak and Muddle the Mixture this turn. But if I don't, then I can play Mana Leak and Brazen Borrower this turn. And so I'm going to go ahead and just go for that. So, and with that in mind, I kind of need all of my blue. All right, so opponent goes for Mana Crypt. This is kind of what I was hoping would happen here. You cannot use Workshop Mana to pay for alternate costs like Mana Leak. You can use it to pay for alternate costs like taxing effects that cause a card to cost more than it actually costs, but you can't use it to pay for a card that demands you spend mana. It doesn't make the card... If Mana Leak says target spell costs 3 more, or it doesn't resolve, something like that, then you could pay for it with Workshop, because it would be as if the card said 3 in the corner. But Mana Leak just says, hey, you're just going to have to come up with 3 mana right now. You're just going to have to pull it out of thin air, or else your card doesn't resolve. And because of that, and luckily, my opponent doesn't play a land for me, and so I get to Mana Leak the Mana Crypt, which actually buys some time. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's the right way to do that? So I do it this way. Now I still have Muddle up, but I also have Brazen Borrower up. I can play one of those cards this turn if I need to. All right, so slowing my opponent down greatly, of course. They do get to play a Soul Ring, and they do get to copy it with their 3 mana Sculpting Steel. But still, I've still destroyed 2 of their mana and slowed them down a good bit here. Opponent then plays Voltaic Key, untaps, plays Sky Diamond. Not quite sure about that one. Might have been better to leave 2 blue up, but obviously slowing my opponent down there, it wasn't super effective. And here my opponent runs out of Time Twister. Very, very nice play. And I think this would have been even worse, of course, if they had the Mana Crypt, but we're definitely going to counter the Time Twister because I can draw 4 cards next turn, but I don't want my opponent drawing 4 cards this turn, especially in a deck that pukes out that much mana, right? All right, so I really don't have much going on here, but I have active Edric, and I top deck Trest on. Nasty Terasti. All right, so we're going to get in there for 4, draw 4 cards here. You know it's bad when you're attacking with your Priest of the Titania, So anyway, all right. Well, I can't use Jeweled Lotus just yet, but I guess if Edric dies or something. But anyway, I'm going to play an uncounterable Arbor Elf. Just leave this floating over here. Throw the Jeweled Lotus into play. Why not? Flooded Grove and Gaia's Cradle, when you can untap 2 lands with Garruk, is just awesome. By the way, I did the math. If I overran there, I would have actually hit my opponent for 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 more damage. I would not have killed them. So that's why I did not make that play. Anyhow, so yeah. I'm going to go ahead and float some mana. I'm trying to do the math and make sure that everything comes out right here. I go ahead and just play Brazen Borrower prior to tapping the Cradle, then tap the Cradle, Terrasted on my opponent, killing another blue source and 4 more mana, and potentially making the Voltaic Key useless. Still haven't even used Garruk yet. So I tap for blue, untap, and then run a ton of blue through and play Tezzeret the Seeker. Of course, I don't have Crucible, and I don't have I can't get Crucible and strip them here. I don't have Vatican Shackles here. But what I can do is throw a Jitte into play, equip it, and then activate Tezzeret and go grab Winter Orb. And my opponent, of course, is now in mega dire straits, right? And my opponent says, all right, it's no longer entertaining. This match is basically I watch as you slowly kill me. And he says, good game. And of course I draw an extra card there because I am the Monarch. So we would have picked up an extra card there, had a 3 power blocker, a 9 power blocker, and a 1/1. My opponent attacked with everything, untaps the land, maybe the shop or whatever. attacks with all three, I can just block, 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 remove 2 counters, kill the elephant that got blocked by the Arbor Elf, and then my opponent's left with no creatures whatsoever, and of course the attack back is lethal. So that doesn't work out at all. They could send everything at Garrick and still not get out of it. So yeah, game's over. But we have a couple more games. So Acadian Mage stops playing, and then I get a few more folks to jump in. There's this one against Cool Damon X. I thought I'd run through quite a few games, given this is like a breakout video for Edric. And you can see here, such an interesting start. Here's one of the problems with Lotus in this deck. Lotus is pretty good. First turn Edric is of course good, but might be better off to go first turn Elf, second turn Edric off the Lotus, and then attack and draw a card. And I mean, that's not bad, but it's all those plays are just so risky against a red-black deck, right? Like there's so much removal available. So I'm just not sure if I keep this hand. But the problem with mulliganing is it is very strong, right? Like I mean, I should, white, like against a non-specific opponent, this hand is certainly a keep. So I decide I'm going to go ahead and take the risk, and I'm going to keep, and I draw a regrowth. It's not what I wanted to see there. So I decide, yeah, I'm going to just go with this play. I'm going to play the Elf, and then that way I can cheat out Edric and attack and draw a card if there's no blocker. And there's no guarantee of that. And of course, my opponent has Disintegrate. So had I gone first turn Edric, I don't know what other removal they have, but if all they had was Disintegrate, then that would have worked out for me, actually. So sad there. I can't even regrowth it because Disintegrate exiles the target and prevents it exiles the target. Anyway, so instead I'm just going to stall. I'm just going to throw down Winter Orb and pass. At least Tropical Island here. It doesn't look like it, but it is a tropical island, right? So I do have that going for me, so there's something. All right, Thieving Skydiver. So now I'm just going to run the Edric Gambit. My opponent missed a land drop, so there's, even if they do kill it here, it does tap them down and, gives me a chance. Instead, opponent just plays a 2/2 blocker, gives creatures haste. And, I mean, sometimes a 2/2 blocker is all you need to stay in the game against Edric. So, and I just top deck nothing. And my opponent misses a land drop, and then I top deck Soul Ring. So good. All right, well, with Soul Ring going, now it's time to go ahead and Spell Seeker, and I'm going to go ahead and get myself a Snap. Such an amazing little bounce card. And with Snap, I can possibly get this out of the way, untap my lands also, right? And, yeah, I mean, it's bad news for my opponent. It's even worse news for them because I can snap, regrowth the Snap, and then attack. Because what will happen is I untap Soul Ring in the island, cast Snap on this, untap the island in the forest, I have 1 mana floating, and then regrowth the Snap, or just Merchant Scroll for Force of Will. Probably Merchant Scroll for Force of Will. Attack with 2, draw 2 cards, and from there, I think, just kind of run away with the game. I've got Force of Will going, Winter Orb going. And yeah, my opponent, as it turns out, the Winter Orb was just enough to make that game work out for me. So my opponent concedes, and we move on to the next game against Moon Key. And my opponent's playing Ragavan. So lots of red or red X opponents today. These should be the hardest matches in theory for Edric because, against blue, you can oftentimes kind of get under their ability to counter, and it's too late, and now you're drawing cards, and then you just overwhelm them with blue spells that, you're both playing blue, but you have a card drawing engine and extra mana sources. But against, like, red and decks that have lots of removal like that, it can be very, very hard to win sometimes with Edric. So these were really good tests for the deck. I did get to go first here, which is really nice. And because, of course, red... First of all, there's only I drew one of my basics. There's only 2 basics left. And secondly, red could possibly be running like a Blood Moon effect. So although I might like to play a blue source, like a dual land, the City of Brass, just in case I drew Mana Drain, I decide here that I'd rather hedge against accidentally drawing all of my basics or possibly getting Blood Mooned. So I'm going to just go this route. And, you know, if my opponent plays first turn Ragavan, then I've got a blocker, and that's okay. They do not. They play first turn Sensei's Divining Top, which is cool. Look at that snap. Really nice to see there. Go ahead and play Edric on turn 2. And my opponent has a turn 2 Mountain into Ragavan Dash. And now they're giving me an interesting choice, because if I block, like, it'll be a couple turns before I can play Edric. They can play Ragavan a lot sooner. They don't know I have Strip Mine, of course. But if I don't block, then they're going to get a treasure token and the top card of my library. Top card of my library is unlikely to punish me, like the Lotus or a Mox might punish me, but for most part, it's probably not going to be a big deal. But they could get a treasure here, and then if they have a bolt, they just bolt Edric after combat, and then I'm really sucking. So I thought about it, but I decide if they had a bolt last turn, they wouldn't have played first turn top, they would have bolted the elf. So I'm going to take the risk here. So I let him have the treasure and the Exile Misty Rainforest, which I'm quite happy to see there. And then dash, pick up Ragavan, and that's it. All right. I draw a Brainstorm. This would have been the elf, the snow elf. And but no, it's a Brainstorm now, so we're going to go ahead and swing in, grab a couple of cards. Seeing a Jitte is very, very good against Ragavan, and I decide, like, I'm in a very comfortable position here. I have Otawara that I can use to bounce. I have Snap that I can bounce. I have Brainstorm that I can cast. So from this position, I decide, you know, I'm just going to do nothing. I could Skydiver the token, but because I have Otawara and the ability to bounce anything my opponent plays, and I have a Legend in place, so this only costs 3 to activate, I am fine just doing nothing. So if my opponent were to, like, play, say, and then they sack a treasure to activate Sensei's Divining Top, and I think that's basically bad, right? I'm happy to see that. But if my opponent were to have played, like, somehow, say, like, Lotus, Ragavan, you know, play a land, sack, you know, land, something, cast, like, a Planeswalker or whatever, then I could snap the Ragavan, untap my lands, then Otawara the Planeswalker, and I'd be perfectly fine. Or mostly fine, depending on which Planeswalker it was. Anyway, instead what happens is my opponent plays a land here, plays Academy Manufactor. I can steal this with Thieving Skydiver, but then I'm not really using my mana effectively this turn for tempo. So I decide that, given my situation here, I'm just going to go ahead and take the tempo play and bounce that back to my opponent's hand. Using Otawara, maximizing my mana expenditure. If they want to replay it, of course, then I can Skydiver it. The other thing is, if I Skydiver it, if I would have played a land and Skydivered it, I would have not been able to attack with Llanowar Elves here, and I liked the idea of instead of forcing my hand into the Skydiver route, I like the idea of getting Jitte down and equipping Edric, and then using the Jitte counters to make it so that Ragavan is sort of dead on board, and I don't have to worry too much about it. So I decided to do that, and I'm going to attack here, and then I do my mana this way. I take a point of damage here, because if I draw, like, a Bird of Paradise, I might want to play that, and if I don't, I might want to Strip Mine. I don't know which one it's going to be. So I swing in, get 2 counters on the Jitte, see a Brazen Borrower, and decide, yeah, I'll just Strip Mine. We'll just slow my opponent down a bit. With Brazen Borrower, I now have the ability to bounce, even if my opponent does make a crazy play like I described. I gave up the ability to bounce when I threw away Otawara, and I picked it right back up with the Brazen Borrower. So I mean, bounce a non-creature, right? Of course, I've got the Snap. Of course, if my opponent does just do this, then I've got many options to deal with it. So the easiest is the tempo play. So I'm just going to snap that back to their hand, untap the 2 lands, and then from there I get to orb my opponent out of the game. You know, Edric, draw multiple cards, play lands, orb my opponent out of the game. If they finally untap enough lands, and I'm holding the Skydiver, like, yes, I could have stolen it with the Skydiver here, but once again, tempo more important than card advantage in this case. I've got tons of card advantage coming in, and if I Skydiver it here, then I don't get to orb my opponent. So it's just like last turn. There are other things I want to do with my mana, so I just go for the snap play, and yeah, it's game over. Opponent scoops. I like how it says artifact creature, and then see what it says. what kind of creature is it? It's an assembly worker, but it's actually a better description of this card showing right there on my screen. Anyway, just a little bit silly. And that's it. I've got, oh, I'm sorry, I've got one more game against Little Mana Vault. And this actually was a doozy. So this game actually prompted me, I almost forgot, to make this video because it was super fun and interesting and absolutely nuts. And once again, playing another possibly removal heavy deck. Partners, of course, being one of my least fun things to face, but I have no guilt facing partners with Edric. I don't have any guilt, honestly, playing Edric in a format where it's legal, and I really don't have any guilt playing against partners. And this is one of the worst. There are just a handful of commanders that honestly I would love to ban. I would happily ban Edric and Zur, but I would also love to see Tevesh Szat banned. I'd love to see Timna banned. I'd love to see the blue-red one commander who draws cards whenever you discard. I'd love to see that thing banned. There's a bunch of just really gross commanders that are just miserable to face because it's kind of like, hey, do you have removal? No? Okay, game over. Like, yay. But when you're playing two busted commanders against each other, then it kind of goes back to being interesting again, because now it's a battle of the broken, and I have a pretty broken start, so I'm going to keep. And we have a fun, like, this opponent was very cool, and we have a nice fun exchange, just kind of talking throughout the game. Opponent says that he's rusty, and I say my deck's hyper-tuned, and he says that's fine. And then my opponent, Mr. Rusty over there, leads off. Well, wait till you see how he starts. Gemstone Caverns, exiling another opponent with Gemstone Caverns, exiling Simeon's Spirit Guide. So that's how my opponent leads off. So it's my turn, of course. So I'm going to play Catacombs, Mox Diamond, throw away the Confluence, Finhorn Elves, Chrome Mox, imprint the Regrowth, Mana Vault. So I am all in. If my opponent can deal with this board, I'm basically toast. But I don't fetch the Catacombs there for a very specific reason. And it's because I really need to refill my hand. So my opponent doesn't do anything crazy, then I can sack the Verdant Catacombs and I can go get a creature. Then on my turn I can use Mana Vault and my 2 mana sources to play Edric and attack for 2 and draw 2 cards. Start rebuilding. But I said if he doesn't do anything crazy, and my opponent's got a crazy start. To go with his Gemstone Caverns, he's got Jeweled Lotus, Impulsive Pilferer. When it dies, create a treasure token. Phyrexian Tower to go with it. So now he gets Rograth. He can sack the Impulsive Pilferer for 2 black and a treasure token. Has his Lotus, of course. Gets the Lotus out. Tevesh Szat. Gets to immediately sack Rograth and draw 2 cards, because it's his commander. Has a black floating, and gets to play a Memnite, which is going to clog up the ground and get in the way of Edric, and protect his Tevesh Szat. And ends up he miscalculated, and I think he wasted his Lotus Petal, but holy smokes, what a ridiculous turn from my opponent. So we both started with absolute ridiculous turns. My opponent played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards, and I played 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. My opponent actually played, even though it looks like I puked out more mana, but my opponent actually played more cards, did like more things overall. I guess Black Lotus is better than Mana Vault. Who knew? Anyway, at the end of my opponent's turn, I'm going to Verdant Catacombs, but here Mana Vault ends up doing me a real solid because I top deck the absolute perfect card in this situation. Well, one of the perfect cards as far as Edric is concerned. And funny enough, it's probably not the one you're thinking of, but it's actually this one, Deep Forest Hermit. Now I get to apply tremendous amounts of pressure on my opponent. So I'm going to attack with both creatures. I'm willing to trade with the Memnite because that's 2 black, and it's also card drawing. So I'm willing to trade off one of these to with the Memnite and still hit this for a point of damage. So I send both of them at the commander, and my opponent actually does not take the trade and chooses to allow Tevesh Szat to just take a couple of damage there and keeps his Memnite so that he's got fuel, which actually makes a ton of sense. And then my follow-up is, bam! How about 11-11? How about I put an 11/11 into play, divided by 4, divided up into, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 creatures, potentially a Brain Geyser if my opponent doesn't deal with this board right away. And Tevesh Szat, for all the bustedness that it is, does not actually typically run like pyroclasms and things like that, mainly because it tends to want to generate lots of tokens and not clear the board. Alright, so my opponent's turn makes thralls, plays a City of Brass, replays their Rograth, which now sets them up to draw 2 cards next turn, and also gives them plenty of blockers to keep their Tevesh Szat alive. I draw a position, but notice Chrome Mox, unfortunately not templated like Mox Diamond, does not produce mana of any color. I would have loved it if they made a Chrome Mox like a Mox Diamond, where you just discard a card and then it produces mana of any color instead of imprinting and all that. But then again, the card's pretty busted, and that would just make it super busted. So maybe not. The opponent says, "Oh, hi YouTube." Anyhow, yeah. So I've got opposition, but I can't play it here. However, what I can do is put tons of pressure on Tevesh Szat, send everything that way, maybe hold back a little bit, play Edric, and then like send the crew at Tevesh Szat and really pressure the heck out of it. But I realize that that's not necessarily the best play for me, because while it does give my opponent the options, first of all, they can block, so I don't want to attack with this. They can block here, and then the squirrels become smaller and less threatening. I mean, maybe I should attack that way, but like, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, what actually will win the game more for me than attacking into a Planeswalker is attacking and possibly drawing like 5 or 6 cards. Depending on how my opponent blocks, I can kill everything they have in play and draw a couple of cards. So like, I decide, I'm just going to do that. I mean, this is an Edric deck. Let's do it. Let's play Edric and then swing in. And so that's what I decide to do. I do it this way because you can't wasteland a Finhorn Elves, but you can wasteland a Dryad Arbor. So if I'm going to trade off, these 2 cards are basically equivalent. So if I'm going to trade one of them off, I'd rather trade off the Arbor. Plus, Finhorn Elf's not affected by Winter Orb if I happen to get like an Orb here. So I actually send in everything, including the Deep Forest Hermit. If my opponent trades here, I'm okay with it. I still get to draw like tons. And not attacking means not drawing one more card. And I want to draw as many as I can. And my opponent chooses not to blow their entire board up. All those creatures represent mana and cards from my opponent. I think they probably should have traded the Memnite for the Deep Forest Hermit, but they choose not to, so I end up hitting my opponent for 12 damage, which is actually fairly significant, or excuse me, 10 damage, and then drawing 6, which is just nuts, right? Now notice I'm actually played this game and I have no lands at all. I mean, we can count Dryad Arbor as a Finhorn Elf. I basically have no lands, right? So I draw, no lands. Oh, the mother of all lands, plus in a Boseiju, which is really nice. Like, what a draw. All right, so we're just going to tap for 1,000,000 mana. Play the Soul Ring, play the Talisman, play the Trigon, and then I decide to make a play that's maybe a little strange, but I decide I'm not going to Boseiju anything. I could, and I might have been wrong to do this. I might have been better off Boseiju for 1, kill the Phyrexian Tower, let my opponent get a regular land, but lose that, turn 2 lands into 1 basically, and then witness the Boseiju back with the mana floating. That might have been the correct play here, but I decide to hold off. So we'll see what happens. Opponent has a Lotus Petal. Plays a Skirk Prospector, draws 2 cards with Tevesh Szat on Rograth. Obviously, if they get a sweeper here, then it gets pretty gnarly for both of us, but mostly for me. Although having the artifact mana, this is part of the reason why we run the extra artifact mana, does mean that, and holding back on the Witness, I was thinking about them possibly like Toxic Deluging or something, and so that was the other reason to hold the Witness, because I could Witness back the Hermit, get the Hermit back down, and then have guys create a mantle and do something with opposition. So that was the other reason for kind of holding back on that. But instead, what just happens is my opponent pukes out even more mana, but has no real big threat. All right, so upkeep. I'm going to leave the Mana Vault tapped because I don't know what I'm going to do, and I'm looking at possibly drawing a lot of cards here. And I just didn't want to tap a Cradle to untap the Vault. It just represents too much mana, and I don't really have spare. I could use Soul Ring, but then I'd have to tap Chrome Mox and a Dryad Arbor because I wouldn't want to tap my blue, and it just gets kind of awkward. So I just let the Mana Vault stay tapped. Top decking a blue source here is a big deal because it allows me, well, it allows me to potentially play opposition and still have like blue if I need it this turn, like if I draw a counter spell or something. So I am going to play the opposition, and I really don't want to trade creatures off. Like I want to get in. I want to make sure my creatures connect. So I'm thinking about it, and I decide this is going to be the turn that I'm going to use the Witness. And there's just nothing to target here. So I decide to use Boseiju. And I decide I'll kill the flyer who could prevent me from drawing a card. It does give my opponent a land, but my opponent's like just flush with mana. It's cards that matter more, and so I'm gonna give him the land, regrowth the Boseiju. Also, land's not gonna matter that much. I do have opposition and squirrels going, so soon enough I can deal with the land. I'm gonna get rid of the 1/1, so now there's just a singular 1/1 over there. Also, Deep Forest is on a timer here, by the way, which is, I'm aware of. So I do end up using the Witness I just played to tap their only blocker who can kill anything, and I'm going to swing in for a lot of cards, possibly. I am obviously looking for like Force of Will or Force of Will adjacent cards, right? Opponent chooses not to chump, and I don't attack Tevesh Szat at all. I'm going straight to face, trying to get control of this game the other way. First card I draw, Merchant Scroll, lovely. I haven't played a land yet, so we'll go and draw them one at a time. Fierce Guardianship, very nice. Snap, amazing. Flooded Grove, incredible. So the cards I draw are just absolutely perfect. I killed the Lotus Petal even with an Opal because they're still, now they're 2 artifacts off from having an active Opal. We'll get that next. I get to play Flooded Grove here. So glad that I didn't play a land. Flood some blue mana into the Grove, snap one of their tokens out of existence, and then untap Gaia's Cradle and Flooded Grove. And now I've got all the blue mana back that I could want. So I'm going to go ahead and float some mana and Merchant Scroll. I suppose, in hindsight, I could have snapped my own Deep Forest Tournament here, but it would have prevented me from having as much mana as I currently have. But it goes for a Tybalt's Trickery, a counterspell, basically. Interesting choice that they would wait so long for to make this play. But of course, by now I have Fierce Guardianship, so I'm just going to counter that. And Merchant Scroll into Force of Will. Actually decide not to go get a Cyclonic Rift. It's just not that impactful at this point in the game. I can Bloom Tender down, I can tap their blocker, and then I've got Force of Will and I've got Muddle. So from here, I'm mostly fine. I just want to Force of Will, whatever they, they're down to just 1 card in hand. So I'm gonna get into their mana a little bit here. I'm gonna go ahead and use Bloom Tender to tap their Phyrexian Tower, since that is the equivalent of tapping 2 mana. Leaving my opponent with 5, 6 mana, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana, but only 1 card in hand. Now they're gonna draw, of course, with Tevesh Szat. So they draw a land, thin their deck out a little bit. Also keep in mind, my opponent's at 14. Like, they've taken a serious beating from these squirrels. Plays Songs of the Damned, which gives them 3 black. This is the last card in their hand, and I'm thinking, what the heck is they doing? They just play it, and it makes sense in some ways. I think they probably should have used Tevesh Szat on, like, Skirk first, or maybe sack the Skirk, but I realize what they're doing after the fact. They're using it to play the commander tax. So, I mean, this is, acceptable. So now they get to draw 2 cards and keep them both. If they only sack a regular creature, they draw 2 cards and then discard. Otherwise, now they get to keep both spells. So, and then from there, they go for Underworld Breach. This could actually just end the game in their favor right now. Crazy top deck. Thankfully, of course, I've got this Force of Will. So I'm going to go ahead and force it, and they don't have any counter-like effects to deal with that. No Pyroblast or anything. So we're good, and at this point, I've navigated the game to a victory. Super interesting. So with this vanishing on the stack, I go ahead and tap their blocker. Super interesting that I made all these squirrels and then never attacked Tevesh Szat, but, card drawing is that's disruption, but card drawing is often better than disruption, especially in a deck like this. And funny enough, this deck's loaded with bounce, and I never really saw any. Well, not until it's too late. As you'll see, it doesn't matter in the end. I'm going to go ahead and strip mine their Untapped Cavern, just because I don't know what kind of tricks they might have, but that's just 1 less mana for them to do anything this turn with. Send in everything. Hopefully Edric doesn't get, like, lightning bolted with the last card in their hand. Doesn't look like it. I wasn't quite able to go lethal here, but we're going to draw a lot of cards. So massive Brain Geyser, and of course kill the Mox Opal. And looky what we have here. Nice little Green Sun Zenith, Mana Crypt. I mean, and from here it's all just going through your paces here. Play a Priest of Titania. Play a giant Green Sun Zenith on 8. You know what's coming. Nasty Trasty, and now I can kill their Planeswalker. Okay. Giving them 3 elephants. I also have Snapcaster, and I have Snap in the graveyard, and I'm going to be using that. So he will actually be a Snapcaster in a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and discard for the turn and pass. And then during upkeep, I'll tap mana. That's fine. They can have elephants, just not black, please. And I've got 2 counter spells ready to go. Of course, they could attack, but clearly that's just crazy. If they were to do that, that would be silly. I go ahead and play Snapcaster and pick up my snap my Terastodon, untap lands, tap them. I could have actually done this. I realized after I did it that I could have actually Snapcaster snapped Gaia's Cradle into Flooded Grove and then just played Terastodon again last turn, which it doesn't make any sense. Like, why? How can I spend 2 mana on Snapcaster, 2 mana on Snap? That's 4 mana, and somehow have 10 mana like produced by that. But of course, Gaia's Cradle doesn't make sense, and neither does Snap. Oops, so I missed that, so I'm a turn behind, but I think I'll be able to pull the victory out of this game. Top deck Brainstorm here. Of course, I'm just going to do the Terastodon thing. Boom, boom, boom. And my opponent is at 1 life. I'm going to go ahead and Brainstorm. And look at that, Brainstorm into a Rift. That's pretty cool. So now, in this case, of course, Brainstorm massively better than the Hermit, than the 1/1 artifact, sorry, the 1/1 creature, at a time when it doesn't matter. But and then I choose not to attack because I'm going to get an old school kill here, and I'm going to tap their City of Brass. And whenever City of Brass becomes tapped, it deals 1 damage to you, whether or not you tap it for mana. So my opponent says, I'm going out on my own terms, and he floats mana and dies. And I thought that was pretty cool. Just a fun little, finisher. Obviously, if there were any chance that would cost me the game, I wouldn't get silly like that. But in this case, there's literally 0 chance that that's going to lose the game. And just a fun way to finish it up. So Death by City of Brass, something that I haven't seen in years and years and years. Anyway, so that is the Edric deck. Obviously, that's the sort of nuts version, but something about drawing 5 cards per turn for 3 turns in a row that does lend itself to winning a game. I do hope very much that you enjoyed it, and I cannot decide how I feel about this. Man, Brainstorm is such a good card. I just cannot decide how I feel about running it over a mana source. I mean, you could run like Gilded Goose or whatever, or that one that produces colorless. I'm just not sure how I feel about it. Maybe there are other cuts that should be Brainstorm, but I'm really not sure what they are. The deck is incredibly tight, very, very good deck, and I mean, I suppose I could cut a land, but who knows? At any rate, that's going to wrap it up for this very long video, though. And so hopefully you enjoyed watching, and if you're interested in copying the deck and playing some of it, maybe you can give me some feedback. Even if you don't do it that way, I'm always interested in your thoughts. Do you think that I should run maybe a few more Mana Dorks? Is there some obvious card that I completely overlooked? When Brian looked at my list initially, he says, hey, where's Kinnan? And I was like, what? Kinnan? What does he do? So, what am I missing here? It's a nuts card in this deck, by the way, and the fact that you can tutor it is just great. Yeah, what are your thoughts? Anyway, thank you very much. But until next time, I think that we'll wrap it up here, and I'll look forward to your thoughts in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.